Well, welcome to Group 1. Now we would like to explain to you about assessment in English language teaching, test and non-test. So we come to introduction. So language is used in social interaction to accomplish purposeful tasks such as communicate with other people, reading news to get information, learning by listening professor, give lecture about science, writing homework paper and etc. Assessment in language teaching. Assessment and evaluation are essential components of teaching and learning in English language arts. Also, Irwin and Happlestone and Porchan Bay Felton suggested that assessments should be flexible by using various methods to facilitate students' needs, abilities, and characteristics. The students can get involved in deciding their own evaluation. Traditional assessment. Traditionally, the most common way to measure achievement and proficiency in language learning has been tests. The concept rose since traditional testing offered the fairness in the opportunities earned by the students in doing the test independently to get the score at the end of learning. Alternative assessment or non-test. Non-test methods such as observations, interviews, journals, and etc. Their function is to assemble additional measures of students' evaluation in the effort to triangulate data about students' ability.
In the teaching activity, you'll find assessment and testing. Assessment is not the same as testing. Assessment is an ongoing process that is done in teaching process. More than tests, assessment is a wider activity in measuring students' performance and also helping students to improve their ability, knowledge, skill, and proficiency. Therefore, testing is a part of assessment. So, there are two types of assessment: test assessment and non-test assessment. If we talk about test and non-test assessment, let's also talk the other dichotomy of assessment. There is formal and informal assessment, and also norm reference test or NRT and criterion reference test or CRT. First, let's talk about test and non-test assessment. Test assessment is a method of measuring person's ability, knowledge, or performance in a given domain. Assessment test is with instrument, techniques, procedures, or items, while non-test assessment is measuring students in learning process and progress. Non-test assessment appreciates the student's efforts in learning and the struggling time until the end of learning. Test assessment is measurable with score, so it can be compared with other students. While non-test assessment does not need to take score. Non-test assessment, it is orienting to process and context. So, non-test assessment evaluates factors that can influence achievement and relates the contents of learning to specific goals. Test assessment is in the form of multiple choice, true or false question, matching, or others, while non-test assessment is in the form of questionnaire, observation, or interview, or others. Questionnaire is a question that is used to collect data about students' background as data sources to analyze students' behavior and learning process. Observation is note students' performance unintentionally, while interview is making a conversation or discussion between the teacher and one of the students about the schoolwork. Second, formal assessment versus informal assessment. Formal assessment is measuring students' ability, skill, knowledge, and proficiency by systematical sampling techniques. The sampling process is structured using standard testing and score taking. Informal assessment is unplanned and unintentional. It is done during the learning activity that can measure students' performance and progress. It can be in forms of comments, feedbacks, suggestion, response. Informal assessment also do not record results or even scores and do not judge about students' competence. And the third is norm reference test and criterion reference test. First, norm reference test or NRT. NRT is measuring global language abilities such as listening ability, reading comprehension, speaking, or others. NRT is used to know students' ability in a language in the form of mean or average score, median, middle score, or percentile rank. Percentile rank means that it can be compared to the other students' rank. For example, in a 100 students who followed the test, a student got 70 of percentile. It means that he is better than 70 of them and worse than 30 of them. NRT assessment, it can be standardized test like TOEFL, TOEIC, or another test that take score and be compared to the others. While criterion reference test or CRT is used to measure students' performance or learning points in fairly specific objective and information. CRT is comparing students' performance to the amount of materials percentage, not with other people. For example, in a specific topic test, a student got score 85%. It means that he know 85% of the material. If the other student got 100%, it means that the student understand all of the topic that is being tested.
Okay, now we will discuss about a function of assessment. Before I will explain about the function of assessment, I want to tell you about the definition of assessment first simply. Yes, assessment is a process to get data or information about the learning process and give feedback for teachers and students. Next, the function of assessment. There are two kinds of the function of assessment. The first, formative, and the second, summative. What is formative assessment? Formative assessment to evaluate students in the process of forming their skill with the goal of helping them continue their growth process. Example, the teacher give comment and suggestion to student. Call attention to an error. Other example, the teacher draw or paint mind map to test their understood about the topic, and then like so one or two sentences that identify main point about the topic. That feedback is offered to improve the learner's language ability. And then next, the function of assessment. The function of assessment. The second is summative. A summative assessment is to measure or summarize the growth of student, usually occur at the end of course. For example, final exam, midterm exam, quizzes, etc. Summative assessment, in other words, has some function. The first, to decide final score of student in certain period, and then to give explanation about ability of student, and then to know their success in certain period about the topic. Assessment and testing. Assessment, systematic process of documenting and using empirical data on the knowledge, skill, attitudes, and belief. By taking assessment, teachers try to improve student learning. And then the definition, the second definition, assessment is much more than test. In language assessment, First, gather information in a systematic way with the help of language testing tools. For example, the teachers use oral interview to gather information about student speaking abilities and then make interpretation based on that information. After that, finally, based on the interpretation, make a decision or take action within the classroom and program. So the teacher may decide that student need more work and oral fluency. And then next, assessment and testing. Testing in language contest. A test is designed to measure and evaluate student language proficiency according to different qualities. In other words, testing is measuring tools to test or to evaluate the ability of student or learners. The function of testing. There are function of testing. The first, testing tells teachers what students can or cannot do. In other words, testing tells students how well they are progressing. And then, by identifying students' strengths and weakness, testing will help evaluate the effectiveness of program, course, book materials, and method. So, testing to measure the materials and method or book or program.
Well, after talking about assessment, let's talk about some types of tests. First, I would like to tell you about discrete point test. So, discrete point test is a type of test which is separated into some part of languages such as phonology, syntax, morphology, discourse, vocabulary, some kind of skills which are listening, speaking, writing, and reading. So, the function of this test is assessing one component of the skills. For example, the teacher want to know or want to assess the student's vocabulary. So the teacher give a test related to vocabulary. For example, choose the correct meaning of the word administer, to provide or apply, to ask someone, to measure, or to understand. That's the example. Next is integrative test. So integrative test refers to kind of test which is integrated into some skills and languages component in one test. So in one test, the students can get more than one skills or some integrative skills. For example, a closed test. So a closed test is kind of reading test, like on this example. So on the reading test, some of the words are deleted, and what the students need to do is fill in the blank by the appropriate vocabularies and appropriate grammar. So by this kind of test, the students can get some integrative skills like vocabulary, grammar, and many others. Next is dictation. So the dictation is kind of listening activity. So listening to a reading process by the teacher or by using an audio tape in a loud voice. So what the students need to do is write what they have heard. So by writing, the students can get some integrative skill like writing skills, grammar, and many others. Then language aptitude class. So language aptitude test, language aptitude class. Aptitude test. So language aptitude test refers to the form of the test measuring general ability of people through an exposure to foreign language. So this test has a function as the application of the classroom of any languages. For example, the MLAT test, the Modern Language Aptitude Test, the standardized aptitude test used in the United States. You can see on the table. The next is proficiency test. So proficiency test is a test of all skills of language. So the test commonly use standardized multiple choice question of listening, reading, grammar, and vocabulary. For example, TOEFL test. Recently, they also use like speaking, also writing, like in IELTS test. Next is placement test. So the test is for classifying students into some level of the program depend on their ability, low, intermediate, or advanced, or some kind of levels. For example, in a school, the new students got a placement test in order to classify them into some classes, low, intermediate, and advanced. So the teacher can adjust the material depend on the student's competence. Next is diagnostic test. So diagnostic means diagnosing the strength and the weakness of the students. For instance, in the classroom, the teacher provides the test of writing to know rhetorical and linguistic features of the student's project. By doing the test, the teacher can identify the difficult part of the task that the students need to focus on and include it in the curriculum. Next is achievement test. So this kind of test is usually at the end of the program to give an information about the students' accomplishment and achievement. For example, the learners have to finish Unit 1 up to 4 of the course book, and the teacher now gives them an achievement test based on what they have seen in this unit. The test is taken from the teacher's book. Next is standardized test. So the test administers the student's competence by using international benchmark, for example, GRE test. The conclusion is, so test and non-test assessment are important, both are important in English language teaching. Those kind of tests are useful for teaching and learning process. By giving assessment, the test, the teacher can check the student's understanding of the materials, know the strength and the weakness of the students, identify what the students need, classify the students' level, measure the students' competencies, and many other advantages which a teacher can get. It depends on what type of assessment and test is used by the teacher. Last is the reference. Thank you so much.